Hi, welcome to Microsoft SQL tutorials. My name is Amir. This is part 6, Constraints in SQL Server. Before going to start this session, please watch part 5, How to create tables as a prerequisite. In this session, we will understand what is SQL constraint and what are the commonly used constraints across the DB or across the SQL Server. What is SQL constraint? SQL constraints are used to specify rules for data in a table. Constraints can be specified when the table is created with the create table statement or after the table is created with the alter statement. Constraints are used to limit the type of data that can go into a table. This ensures the accuracy and reliability of data in the table. If there is any violation between the constraint and the data action, the action is aborted. Constraints could be either on a column level or a table level. The column level constraints are applied only to the particular column only, whereas the table level constraints are applied to the entire table. The advantage of the data constraint is to make SQL Server to avoid invalid data entry. So if you see on my screen, there are different types of constraints are there. First of all, there are three types of constraints. One is domain integrity constraints, entity integrity constraints, referential integrity constraints. That what we're having. Under that types of constraints, we're having different types of constraints again. That is one not null constraint, check constraint, default constraint, unique constraint, primary key constraint, foreign key constraint, index constraint. That's what we are having. If you see under domain integrity constraints, we are having not null, check, and default constraints what we are having. Let me explain you one by one. What is not null constraint? If I'm having a table, okay, if you see in the previous videos, I have created so many tables and I have specified not null. This is nothing but one of the constraint. So it will ensure the column cannot have the null values. For and suppose if I have specified ID as not null, so in that case, so we can't uh, leave it at the null values over there in that particular column. Okay, in the mean to say is that we have to enter some value over there based on the data type into the particular column. Now, let me tell you the another constraint that is called check constraint. So it will ensure that all the values in the column satisfy the particular condition. Let's assume there are some of the values that we have to insert. Let's assume I have to enter the phone number. The length of the phone number must be having 10 characters. So the condition is that there is a specific condition or that must and should has to be followed. Must and should has to satisfy the specific condition. In that case, that I'm going to give it as check constraint over there. So coming next to the default constraint. So default constraint, it will set the default value when I'm left it as when I not entering any value into the particular column, or when I'm not providing any value, no value is specified. Let us assume if there is any city is required, if I'm not going to give any value over there, by default it has to give some values over there into the particular column. In that case, I'm going to use default constraint over there. Entity integrity constraints. Under entity integrity constraints, we are having unique constraint, primary key constraint. So we will discuss about the unique constraint. So it will ensure that all the values in the column are different. So if I am going to specify ID as a column name and I want to, there should be the unique values. In that case, that I'm going to specify it ID as unique, or else let me tell you the email IDs. If I'm having the column which will store the values of the email addresses, this all the values should be unique over there. In that case, that email ID should be unique key constraint. Okay. Now, primary key constraint. Primary key constraint is a combination of not null and unique. Uniquely, it identifies each row in a table. So it will satisfy both the conditions not null values as well as the unique key constraints. So in some cases, if you see ID, there shouldn't be no, it shouldn't be null. There shouldn't be no null values over there in the ID column, and there should be unique over there. in the same way email IDs also. In that case that we are going to specify the primary key constraint over there on the columns. Next, referential integrity constraint. So that we are having foreign key constraint that over there you are having. It should be uniquely identifies a row or the record in another table. Let me tell you an example. If I'm having some of the values over there in the table one, we are going to refer the column name as ID over there in the secondary table. Okay, in that case that we are going to use it foreign key constraint over there. Next, index constraint. Index constraint is used to create or retrieve data from the database very quickly. So to retrieve the data very fastly on the columns or the particular thing, then we are going to create indexes on the tables. Okay, this is all about the things that we are having different constraints over there on the SQL Server. Now let me switch to SQL Server Management Studio and let me show you directly how to create, how to create the constraints on the tables and how to alter and how to, drop the constraints and how to create the indexes. Now I'm going to create, if you see on my screen, there are two tables that we are having. Okay, the first table is person information, and the table is orders. So these two tables refers the personal information is nothing but the person ID, last name, first name, age, email address, city, that what we are having the columns. And if you see the second table, based on the first table personal information, what are the orders he has given, it will be stores all the orders has been given by the person. So if you see in the create table over here, the orders table, it is having order ID, order number, person's ID, which is related to the person info, that is nothing but ID, we are going to store it over here. So these two tables that I'm going to create it. But here in this session that we are going to discuss about the different constraints over there, right? So let me go ahead and in the first table, in the person info that I'm ID, I'm giving as int data type, and I'm going to give it as not null constraint. So this is the first constraint that what we are having, not null constraint. So it is means it won't store any null values over there in this ID column. That is the priority on the not null. If you're going to specify not null constraint, the ID column won't store any null values over there. In the same way, last name, first name, we have given the data type as varchar 255 with the length 255, and then we are going to store the data with not null. In the sense, it won't allow any null values in the ID, last name, first name. Now coming to check constraint. So if you see over here, what I'm going to do, the person who are going to or giving the orders or storing the data in the person information, the constraint has to be there, the age should be greater than or equal to 18. So it is, if you see over here, I'm going to specify it at the column level. So this is the column level constraint that I'm going to column level that I'm going to applying it. So that I'm going to having the age over here, age is int, and it has to store based on the condition where checking the, it has to satisfy the condition where age is greater than 18. Now I'm having email address. Email address, if you see, this is unique key constraint. So that I'm having email ID, it is having n varchar of 250 and it won't accept not null values. Okay, it won't accept null values. And that is the reason should be unique values. So that's the reason I'm going to create email address as unique constraint. Coming to city, so that I'm going to specify at varchar of 250. Okay, if I am but here if you see it is not null, we are not giving the constraint as not null, we're going to give it as default value as Mexico. If you see, if I'm going to make it, specifying the values over there, the value should be, if I'm going to provide any null values over there, it's automatically has to take the Mexico over there. Okay, so and also we're going to specify the on the table level that I'm going to specify the constraint, primary key constraint. If you see at the end of the table, that is nothing but I'm going to specifying the values as the constraint primary key based on the ID. Okay, these are all the different constraints what we are having. So first is not null, So on the age, we have specified, we have mentioned check constraint, email ID that we're having unique key constraint, city that we're having default constraint, and after that on the ID that we are having primary key constraint. Okay, let me go ahead and let me execute this table by clicking F5. Okay, so it has been successfully executed. Now let me go to sample DB and let me refresh it. Now if you see, the table personal info has been created. But what about the constraint names? So how it will store the data? So for all these values, I have not given ID as not null, there's no name I have mentioned. If you see, for age only, that has specified constraint as const person age with the name of const person age. So how it is going to store and how it will identify these are the constraints over there and where we can check it out. So now let me expand this DBO person info. So you are having keys and the constraints. Okay, for unique key constraints, if you see that the key value is unique key and the primary key, the whatever the person pk underscore person info that I have mentioned, it has been stored with the same name over there in the keys values. But if you see unique key constraint, but I have not mentioned any values, any names over there. So by default, it has been taken unique key underscore person in dot some unique ID values that it has been mentioned. So where the remaining constraints, if you see the cons person age, which I have mentioned for the age, we can check it out in the under constraints. We can check out this name as cons person age. So if you see the again the default values, the default constraint that what we're having for the city, so it has been mentioned under the constraints, the df underscore person underscore city underscore values. So these are all the things that what we're having. Let me insert one of the value by using design. Let me go to wizard or graphical user interface to insert the values. Okay, now let me show you. This is the design that what I have opened. Let me go to edit top 200 rows. And once if you see over here, ID that we can see over here as the primary key. If you see the properties, you can see the properties over here, right? On the bottoms, on the right hand side, the specification is primary key. And also you can see the column properties, everything over here. If you see, this is the column properties that what we're having. If it is specifying what kind of data that we're going to store it, is it the what is the data type and what is the property, is it a primary key or not? So what is the last name, first name, age, email ID, city, and all the things. So now I'm going to insert the data. So by using graphical user interface, that I'm going to specify it as null. Okay, so but it is allowing not null, right? That I'm going to give it as a default as ID as 1, and then last name that I'm going to give it as Rohit, and the first name that I am Suras. Okay, A should, if I'm going to, the condition has to satisfy. If I'm going to give it as 18 and the email address, I'm going to say rohit dot a at the rate of gmail.com, and then I'm going to say give it as city as Hyderabad. Now if you see the data has been inserted successfully. Now let me go to, I'm not specifying any values in ID. I'm going to give, not specifying, I'm just giving the name as Ritu, and I'm not giving any value in the first name. Okay, also let me check it out first, Ritu S, and I'm going to give it as value as 2 over here in the ID, and I'm going to give the value for the age. I'm going to check it out the age. I'm now what I'm going to do, uh, the 17 that I have given, so it won't satisfy the condition of the age constraint, right? So what is the age constraint? This is the check constraint that what we are having. Let's see. So now I'm going to give Ritu at the rate of gmail.com. Okay, and after that I'm going to give it city as null. Okay, let me see. So what it is showing over here, no rows, that the error it came, there are the data in row 2 was not committed. What is the error? That is the .NET Client SQL provider, the insert statement with the check constraint const per se in the database, and the person info age column is there. It is showing all the values. So it is saying, so it is not satisfying the values of age. So now let me give you 19, it is, which is the greater than the condition, and it is going to be satisfying. In that case, it will saves the data. So you can observe two things over here. The first thing is check constraint. So once if it is throwing an error, so we can go ahead and we can rectify the data. What it is saying, the age constraint, that is nothing but check constraint is working properly. And if you see in the city that have given as null, without I didn't inserted any value over there, but now you can see the value over there that is came as Mexico. This is nothing but default value. Default value, it has given as Mexico, right? Now let me insert one more record. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to uh, add another record, and then now I'm going to check it out, not null constraint, that is first last name, first name. I'm not going to give any values, and I'm going to use satisfying the condition of check constraint, and after that I'm going to give it as some name a underscore gmail.com, and I'm going to save it. Now if you see, this is last name, it is going to throw an error because of it's not null constraint. We have to specify some value over there in the last name as well as the first name, right? That I'm going to say Julie and the first name as F. Okay, now it is going to satisfy all the conditions, then it will save successfully. Now, as the fourth record that I am going to check it out, primary key constraint. Okay, it is going to be working or not. Then I'm going to give it as the primary key constraint that I'm going to give it. It shouldn't be null, right? So first of all, I'm going to check it out, is it null? I have mentioned it as null, and the name that I'm giving as Jetly, and I'm going to first name as giving a J, and I'm going to give it as a 30, and the email ID some Jetly at the rate of gmail.com. Okay, now if I'm going to save it, so it is saying, ID cannot be insert. If you see over here, cannot insert null values in the column ID. So I'm going to enter the value as 3 again. So why I'm going to enter that, to check out the this is ID is the primary key constraint. So primary key constraint, it has to satisfy both the condition that is not null as well as the unique key. But if you see there's already null is there. Let me go through that and let me save the details. So if you see, I got the error primary key constraint. What does that mean? It is not satisfying the primary key constraint. You are going to insert the duplicate records in the personal information. What I have to do now, the unique key constraint also has to satisfy. Now see that all the constraints have been satisfied successfully. Now it has been successfully, right? This is all about the different constraints. One is check constraint, primary key constraint, not null constraint, default constraint, unique constraint. Now we're going to check it out. Okay, foreign key constraint over here in this session. Now if you see, so I'm going to create one more table called orders, so which it is having person ID. So on the person ID foreign, I'm going to add the constraint as foreign key, and also on the constraint I'm going to add a primary key constraint on the order ID table. Okay, so if I'm going to specify the foreign key on person ID referring from the table references from the person info table based on the ID column. Okay, if there is no values, this is you are going to specifying the values over there. So this is the parent and child tables, that what we can say it. So if you say that is that is a foreign key that uniquely identifies a row or the record in another table. Okay, let me go ahead and let me execute this table. Okay, the table has been successfully created. Now let me go to the tables. Let me refresh once again. Now if you see that the orders table has been created, let me go to the keys. There's the primary key, that is pk underscore order is the primary key, and the foreign key on which table that has been created. Because of I have not mentioned any name over here, so it's by automatically it has taken one of the name so that we can easily identify it. Okay, now I have created the two tables, right? So one is person info, another one is orders. Now let me add some of the values by using graphical user interface. Let me go to edit. So now I'm going to give it order ID as 1, order number let us assume 100. The person ID is the foreign key representation based on the foreign key value which is already having out there in the person info, right? If you see over here, let me go to persons info and select top 1000 rows. If you see, these are all the IDs. If I'm going to mention any value away from this ID, it will throw an error. We're having 1, 2, 3, 4 values only. Let me switch to again to orders. Now I'm going to add a value 5. See what it is saying. So the insert statement conflict with the foreign key. The foreign key orders person ID so and so. So this is the foreign key constraint name that what we are having. So that the value has to be there in the primary table or the master table. So where if you see over here in the person info that we are having 1, 2, 3, 4 values only as IDs. So, but I have mentioned as 5, that's the reason it is throwing an error. Let me insert with the value of 1. Now, if you see, it has been successfully inserted, right? Let me add one more example. Now, let me go to the same person info and now let me add number 5, ID 5, okay? And I'm saying Alex. And now I'm going to give it as S and then I'm going to give it as age 45 and I'm giving it alex at the rate of yahoo.com, right? And then I'm going to give it as Delhi. Now I have saved the data. Now if you see, now in the another table, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the same values. Now, can I add the values in person ID with the 5? Yes, obviously. Let me see that once the data is there, I'm going to add the records like order ID as 2 and order number is 200. Now I can insert 5 value in the person ID. Let's see, the data has been successfully inserted. How can we say? Let me go to orders and then go to top 1000 records. If you see the tables, whatever the data is there that has been inserted successfully. So this is all about the different constraints what we had. So we have seen the foreign key constraint also as of now, but there are the different ways that we want to alter the tables, right? So unfortunately, fortunately, if some people are adding the constraints on later on, once the table has been already created. Let me show you. So what I want to do, I want to add a new primary key on the last name. So what I have to do, I'm going to add by using alter statement, alter table name, that is person info. I'm going to add a constraint that is nothing but with the name pk underscore person underscore with the primary key on the table. Now, if you want to drop, so what you can do, alter table. So I want to drop the constraint. Which constraint that I need to drop it? So you are having person info, what are the name that you are having, you are going to mention it, and then you are going to drop it. Okay. Now alter, if you want to add foreign key again, if I want to add it on a particular table, this is the syntax that what we are having. Alter table orders add constraint fk underscore we will give the name fk underscore person order with the foreign key constraint on the particular column where the references is nothing but the table name which I want to be as a foreign from the which table master table that we are going to mention it, person ID, person info, and the column name we are going to mention as ID. So till now we have checked all the constraints except the index. So as I said, index is used to create and retrieve data very fastly from the database. Okay, so for that reason that we are going to create an index. So what is the syntax for the index? If you see over here, create index, index name, it is a user friendly name, whatever you want, on which table, on table, and the column name that we are going to be mentioning it, and we are going to execute this query. Now the command has been executed successfully. So where we have created the index based on the orders table. Now let me go to orders, and if you see the indexes, based on the here is the indexes that you can see. So there are different indexes that what we are having clustered and non-clustered we can see in the later session. But as of now, if you see over here, the name that have mentioned ix underscore order number, that is the index that have been created. So on the order ID number that have been created the index, so that it will show order underscore number. This is the index that what have been created. So thank you for watching this video. Have a great day.